There's a number that separates people who build real wealth from everyone else. Not $1 million, not 500,000, a $100,000. And the frustrating part is that most people who fail to reach it don't fail because they're bad with money. They don't fail because they don't know what to do. They fail because of something that happens in their brain about halfway through the journey that nobody ever talks about. And by the time they realize what happened, they've already quit. Here's what nobody tells you about building your first $100,000. It's not a financial challenge, it's a psychological one. And the psychology of it is completely different from every other financial milestone you'll ever chase. My name is Jorjo, and I've spent a lot of time studying why the gap between $0 and $100,000 destroys more financial ambitions than any other stretch of the wealth building journey. If you want to understand what's actually happening in your brain when you try to build real money from scratch, hit subscribe and stay with me. Because today we're going deep on the one milestone that changes everything and why almost nobody makes it there.
Let's start with the math, because the math is what makes this so psychologically brutal. Say you're saving and investing $1,000 a month and earning a 7% return. Getting from zero to your first $100,000 takes you roughly 7 to 8 years. 7 to 8 years of consistent saving, consistent investing, and consistent discipline. That's a long time. And during those years, the market is barely helping you. Let's be honest about what that actually means. Almost every dollar sitting in that account at year 3 or year 5 is a dollar that you personally earned, personally saved, and personally refused to spend on something else. The market's contribution in those early years is almost invisible. A 7% return on $10,000 is $700. That's it. $700 from an entire year of market exposure. And it doesn't feel like anything. It doesn't feel like progress. It doesn't feel like the money is working for you. It feels like you're doing all the work, and the math isn't cooperating. This is the first thing that kills people. The invisibility of early progress. When you're building from zero, the feedback loop is broken. You're putting in enormous effort and getting back almost nothing you can see or feel. And human beings are not wired for that. We are wired for feedback. We are wired to see results that match our effort. When the results don't show up, our brain starts asking a very dangerous question. Is this even working?
And here's where it gets really interesting. Because the answer to that question depends entirely on which frame of reference your brain is using. If you compare your progress to your effort, it looks terrible. If you compare your progress to where you were a year ago, it looks reasonable. But if you compare your progress to where you need to be to feel like you've made it, it looks impossible. And most people's brains default to that third comparison. They look at $100,000 as the finish line. They look at their current balance, and they see a gap so large that the rational response seems to be to question whether any of this is worth it at all. This is what researchers call the progress trap. You're making real progress, measurable, compounding progress. But the gap between where you are and where you defined success is so large that the progress doesn't register as meaningful. And when progress doesn't feel meaningful, motivation collapses. Not all at once, slowly. The contributions get a little smaller. The saving gets a little less consistent. The investing gets put off for another month, and then another. And before you know it, you've stopped entirely, without ever making a conscious decision to quit. Let me give you a number that will change how you think about this entire journey. At $100,000 invested at 7%, your portfolio generates $7,000 per year completely on its own. $7,000 that you didn't have to earn through your job. $7,000 that showed up because money was working on your behalf. That is roughly what someone working full-time at minimum wage earns in about 3 months. Your money is now working a part-time job.
But here's the thing. You can't feel that yet at $50,000. At $50,000, you're generating $3,500 per year. Still meaningful, but it doesn't quite break through psychologically. It doesn't yet feel like your money has a job. It still feels like you're the one doing all the work. And that feeling, the feeling that you are still alone in this fight, is what drives people to quit right before the math starts working in their favor. Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's late business partner and one of the most successful investors in history, was once asked about building wealth. And his answer has been repeated so many times because it captures something true that most financial advice misses entirely. He said the first 100,000 is a real challenge, but you have to do it. After that, you can ease off the gas a little bit. A billionaire fixating on $100,000. Not a million, not 10 million, 100,000. Because he understood something that most people don't. The first 100,000 is the only stretch of the entire journey where you do basically all the work yourself. It's the only part where the math is genuinely against you. So why do most people quit before they get there? It's not discipline, it's not knowledge, it's identity. And this is the part that most financial content completely misses. At some point in the journey, usually somewhere between $30,000 and $60,000, something shifts in how people see themselves in relation to money. They've been doing the work, they've been consistent, and the account is growing, but it doesn't feel like it matches who they thought they were when they started this journey. The person who was going to build real wealth, the person who was going to break the pattern, the person who was finally going to figure this out. Instead, they feel like someone who is grinding through a process that hasn't delivered yet. And that gap between who they thought they'd be by now and who they actually feel like is exactly where the doubt lives. The doubt doesn't sound like, I'm going to quit. It sounds like, maybe I should reconsider my approach. Maybe this strategy isn't right for me. Maybe I should wait until I have a higher income to really get serious. Maybe I'll start fresh next year with a better plan. And every single one of those thoughts sounds reasonable. That's what makes them so dangerous. They're not obviously self-defeating. They feel like wisdom. They feel like strategic recalibration. But they're just dressed up versions of quitting, packaged in language that lets you walk away without feeling like you failed. Here's what the people who make it through actually do differently. And it's not what most people expect. They don't have more discipline. They don't white-knuckle their way through the hard years. They don't motivate themselves with vision boards and affirmations. They do something much simpler and much more effective. They change the game they're playing. Instead of measuring progress against the $100,000 finish line, they measure progress against their own system. Did I contribute this month? Yes. Did I stay invested when the market dropped? Yes. Did I find one way to increase my savings rate this year? Yes. That's the entire scorecard. The balance is just a side effect of winning that game consistently. This reframe is everything, because when you measure against the finish line, you're always losing until the very moment you win. The gap is always enormous. The progress is always insufficient. But when you measure against your own system, you can win every single month. Every contribution is a win. Every month you stay invested through volatility is a win. Every small increase in your savings rate is a win. And those wins accumulate into something your brain can actually feel as progress. The second thing people who make it do differently is they understand the snowball. Not just intellectually, they feel it. They watch their monthly investment returns start to grow year over year. They notice that the market is contributing more and more to their account, while their personal contributions stay the same. They see the math starting to shift. And instead of discounting that shift because the numbers are still small in absolute terms, they recognize it for what it is. Evidence that the system is working. Proof that the snowball is forming. Because here's the truth about the snowball that most people never understand until they're on the other side of it. The snowball doesn't just roll faster once it crests the hill. It changes how the entire journey feels. Once you hit 100,000 and see how quickly the next 50,000 arrives, the psychology of wealth building changes completely. You stop feeling like you're fighting uphill. You start feeling like the math is working with you instead of against you. And that feeling, that shift from pushing to being pulled, is what makes every subsequent milestone feel achievable in a way that the first 100,000 never did. The people who quit did not fail because they lacked the ability. They failed because they were measuring the wrong thing during the hardest part of a journey that was always going to feel slow before it started to feel fast. They confused the silence of compounding with the absence of progress, and that confusion cost them everything that was waiting on the other side. You are not behind. You are in the hard part, the part that feels like nothing is happening, the part where every month of consistency looks the same as the month before it, the part where the math is still mostly you and not yet the market. Stay in it, measure the right things, and let the snowball do what snowballs do.